Welcome to Exploring Ireland. In today's episode, a city with Titanic reputation. Belfast is our destination. It's the capital of Northern Ireland. We'll wander around the city looking at the Crumlin Road Jail and the Ulster Museum. We'll visit East Belfast, where you can enjoy miles of greenways and the Titanic Quarter. We'll also look at the Game of Thrones tour, and on top of all of that, where to eat, where to drink and where to stay on your visit. You'll hear from local experts to help with your travel plans, as well as Fionn Davenport, who'll share expert advice on where to explore. So, Belfast, founded in the 17th century, it evolved from a small settlement to Northern Ireland's capital. Originally a centre for linen production, the city's growth accelerated in the 19th century with industrialisation, particularly in shipbuilding. Harland and Wolff famously built the Titanic there in 1911. Belfast's history is marked by political and religious tensions culminating in the Troubles from the late 1960s to the 90s. Despite those challenges, the city has undergone significant redevelopment, including the Titanic Quarter in the 2000s, to become a dynamic city well worth putting on your itinerary. Joining us today are Daragh O'Sullivan and Anne-Marie Walsh, who'll be exploring the Titanic Quarter, East Belfast, the Ulster Museum, and taking a look at the Game of Thrones tour, as well as some other interesting places to explore. So, Fionn, Belfast City, what can people expect on their visit?
So, Belfast, which obviously made the news for many decades for all the wrong reasons. So in a weird way, that low bar of expectation is very much to the city's credit. So people come and expect the ravages of a war-torn conflict, and nothing could be further from the truth, even though political tensions still exist and paradoxically are part of the city's attraction in some ways. But other than that, this is very much a modern city. Ethnic communities have really grown in number. The last census, I think they made up something like 9%. You have a city that's brilliant for food, easy enough to get around. And even though it's not the biggest city, but there's plenty of ways to get around. Like, it has 2 airports. Like, you'd never think Belfast has 2 airports. Most arrive at Belfast International, which is 30k northwest of the city. There's a really good bus system and also a train system, because one of the tips that I would give you is that it's a really good way of getting to certain suburbs, particularly to the north, south and east. And it's also very good for day trips to the coast. So, for instance, the beach at Hollywood in County Down is only a 10-minute train ride, right from the heart of East Belfast.
Fionn, you touched on the whole war-torn, war-ravaged, and you said it's not like that at all. No. Culturally, what can we experience in the city? What should we expect?
There's no doubt that the trauma of the Troubles has definitely left its scars. The divisions that you see, particularly in East Belfast and West Belfast, are still very much in evidence. But overall, what I find most appealing about Belfast is this really strong sense of optimism that exists, particularly with young people who refuse to be defined by the divisions of the past. This optimism has allowed for like a real atmosphere of culture to dominate. And so the arts are thriving in Belfast. It's not ironic, but like, I first went to Belfast in pursuit of gigs. And now it's one of the best cities in Ireland and probably both British Isles, both islands, to see gigs, to see live music. It's really thriving music scene. And as well as the food scene, lots of young people. So it's got this great energy. And I think that's the thing that really attracts me to Belfast.
Do you think there's an aspect to like kind of clean slate, people free to experiment?
I think the Troubles of the past shackled 2 communities for a very long time. And there's an entire generation of people who refuse to be defined or shackled by those earlier definitions. They're saying, look, I'm not this and I'm not that. I'm Northern Irish and I want to be free to do all the things that all young people are doing in every other city around Europe. And Belfast really reflects that very well.
Fionn will be back to look at some good places to eat and drink in Belfast. But first, here's Daragh exploring some of the city's top attractions.
Thanks, Dan. So who better to talk to than someone from the biggest attraction in the city, Titanic Belfast? I sat down with Emer Carney, and the first thing we talked about was what visitors can expect from Belfast and Titanic Belfast.
Belfast is a really compact city and you can do so much within such a short space of time. It's a really walkable city, which is good for visitors who want to explore all the key attractions and the key points of interest. But actually, you learn so much about the city just walking through the streets and rubbing shoulders with the locals and seeing what local people do too. So from that aspect, Belfast is a really accessible city in that you can get under the skin of it. Titanic Quarter is just outside the city centre centre, and it's a really special and unique place within Belfast. It's exactly where Titanic, the world famous ship, was built, and where the original Harland and Wolff shipyard was and still is today. So Titanic Quarter is a really mixed area. There's lots of people that live here and work here, but it's a real hub for visitors to the city. Titanic Belfast is the world's largest Titanic visitor experience, located exactly where the ship was built. We opened in 2012, and that was to mark the 100th anniversary of the sinking of Titanic. So it's a really authentic place to come and learn about the Titanic story, and people visit from all over the world to learn not only about the tragic sinking, but everything that came before that and everything that comes after. So it's a really immersive experience. It's very much about bringing the story to life and making the visitors really feel like they're getting under the skin of the story.
So I asked Emer, as a visitor, what can I expect when I arrive?
So it's a self-guided experience, and visitors move through the story chronologically from where it all began in Belfast over 100 years ago. They then go into the shipyard, where there's a little cable car ride that takes you through, and you feel the emotion, you feel the heat of the steel and the smells of the shipyard, and what you can really see what men and women in the shipyard would have experienced over 100 years ago. You can see where Titanic was launched into the water for the first time. You can see what the passengers would have experienced in terms of replica rooms and doing 3D tours of the ship, right round to the sinking, where we very much commemorate those that lost their lives. We recently did a £5 million redevelopment of about a third of the experience, which introduced a new theme, which is the pursuit of dreams. We have the original violin played by Wallace Hartley, the bandmaster, as the ship sank.
There are a few attractions dotted around the main Titanic Belfast building. Emer told us a little bit more about them.
Visitors to Titanic Belfast can also step on board SS Nomadic, which is the original White Star ship that tendered the passengers out to Titanic on her maiden voyage. It's exactly a quarter the length of Titanic. It has one funnel instead of four, and it's really known as Titanic's little sister. On board, there's a lot of the original features. You can see the original paddling, the benches, and some of the cornicing. So you really can step back in time in Nomadic and see what it would have been like to have been a passenger in that era.
There's also a warship from the Royal Navy on site too.
HMS Caroline is another ship in Titanic Quarter. It is operated by the Royal Navy, and it's a ship that took part in the Battle of Jutland. It's a very different ship to SS Nomadic in that it's a warship, so it's very much operational ship, and you can explore what it would have been like to have been a crew member on that through recreations of the different decks and the different settings within the ship. So it's also something very special.
What about exploring the rest of East Belfast? We spoke to Stephen Patterson, a local tour guide with Hometown Tours Belfast, to find out more.
Yeah, so you could easily spend a day along the Titanic Quarter learning about everything to do with the Titanic. It's all based on the Maritime Mile, which is a lovely riverside path. And along that, you have a series of attractions. That would include Titanic Belfast, biggest visitor attraction in Northern Ireland. But there's also the W5 Centre along the Maritime Mile. And that's a children's interactive sort of science park museum. It's really good fun. And the adults can stop for a coffee and look over the Titanic slipways. I live in East Belfast, so I have 3 kids. So I've spent my time in W5 on rainy days with the kids. Really, really good centre. Another thing you can see in Titanic Quarter, you can get right underneath the 2 iconic yellow Harland and Wolff cranes. So the yellow cranes are listed structures, so they always will be there. What's really nice about them is that they built a new road to ease traffic congestion, and it just happens to be right beside these cranes. So you can walk or cycle and look up, and you're literally 10 meters away from them. So they're very accessible. And it's a great place to get a selfie or a photo with the 2 cranes behind you. And they're a fantastic sight. And across the river in the Sailortown area, during the week, you can visit the Belfast Harbour Office, which really tells the story of the development of Belfast from a very small hamlet to a major industrial port.
Moving away from Titanic, I asked Stephen about walking, cycling and the greenways of Belfast.
Belfast is really well catered for greenways, and there's about 30 miles in the city along 3 main routes. You got the Riverlagan Greenway to the south, the Belfast Lock Greenway to the north, and East Belfast has got a whole network of greenways from the Maritime Mile to the Conswater Community Greenway and the Cumber Greenway along a disused railway line. We've also got a public bike hire called the Belfast Bikes, and you can hire them for a day or for a weekend. So it's a great way to explore the riversides and the disused railways of Belfast.
So if we have half a day to explore, we talked about what Stephen would recommend.
If you had a half day to spend on the greenways, you could hire one of the Belfast Bikes. And there's a couple of good routes. About half an hour down the River Lagan, you're following the old Lagan navigation story, and you end up at a lockkeeper's house with a cafe beside it. And it's really interesting to get a tour of that lockkeeper's house. Then the Maritime Mile in East Belfast, all of the Titanic Quarter developments is accessible by traffic-free paths right on the river. And then moving out to East Belfast, you've got about 15 miles of greenways taking in C.S. Lewis Square. The Cumber Greenway is 7 miles along a disused railway line that leads to Parliament Buildings out in Stormont. So a network of riverside and disused railway lines with tourist attractions along the way and a fair amount of cafes where you can stop for a drink or a refreshment.
So I have to say, of everything to see in and around Titanic Belfast, and there's a lot, I really enjoyed walking around the Nomadic just outside the building. It's like wandering through history, and I'd highly recommend it. Obviously, Stephen's knowledge of the area opens up so many possibilities to see a different side of Belfast on its greenways.
So Daragh's described a huge day at Titanic Belfast, a lot of things to see and do, a huge amount of walking, 10,000 step tour I heard. So naturally, you're going to be thirsty and you're going to be hungry. Tell us a little bit more about where to eat and where to drink.
Well, the good news is that from fine dining to just like grazing at local markets, Belfast is a brilliant city to eat well in. Like if you wanted to kind of get a sense of what the city has to offer, I would definitely recommend the Belfast Food Tour with Tasting Tour. But otherwise, your first stop should be St. George's Market. Now, this is a Victorian era building that has all food producers underneath. It's got millions of stalls, local producers from the province. It's wonderful. Everything from top class coffee to baps to all kinds of international cuisine. One of the nice things as well is that the proliferation of restaurants is everywhere throughout the city centre. So I'm going to give you some suggestions. If you want just a straightforward artisan burger, really, really good.
You are talking my language.
Tribal Burger on Botanic Avenue. And Botanic Avenue is lined with both bars and restaurants. This is absolutely brilliant. In the Flatiron building in the middle of town, The Pocket does an amazing Ulster fry, and it's well worth differentiating the Ulster fry from the Irish fry because it comes with potato farls, which the Irish fry doesn't have. And in Ulster, they will proudly defend the Ulster fry. They really, really will. The Cathedral Quarter, which is very much the going out quarter, very cultural, etc., etc. There's some wonderful restaurants. An Italian restaurant called Coppi. There is a very nice bistro called Waterman, which is and has a cookery school upstairs. So if you want to learn to make what you eat downstairs, you can go right upstairs. In the Titanic Quarter that Daragh was walking around, I'm going to name you 3 restaurants. There's Flout, which is a pizzeria on Newtonards Road, and very, very good pizza. There's Cypress Avenue, named after the Van Morrison song, which is in turn named after Cypress Avenue, is a really nice family-friendly bistro-style restaurant. And then, this is the nice one, okay? So the former drawing offices of Harland and Wolff is now called simply Drawing Office 2. And this is a really, really good bar and restaurant.
Nice. That's suitably cool, I think.
In terms of going out at night, of course, you've got your historic pubs. The Crown is the most famous of the Victorian bars. It's more of a tourist attraction as well as a bar. I mean, you can still get a good drink in there. But in the Cathedral Quarter, which, as I said, is the place where people like to go out, the bars that I would recommend are the Deer's Head, the Spaniard, which is a classic old school pub, the Sunflower, and the Sunflower still has a security cage which is preserved as a relic of Belfast Troubles history, and thankfully nowadays it's just simply there as a museum piece. And here's a nice one of my favourite names of a bar in Ireland, the Angel and Two Bibles, which is a speakeasy style cocktail bar. There's the Merchant Hotel cocktail bar. The Merchant Hotel is one of my favourite hotels in all of Ireland, never mind just Belfast. And then the National, which is in the renovated former National Bank building, which is this grand elegant bar, which is perfect for a nice cocktail.
Thanks, Fionn. Stay tuned for a look at some of Belfast's main attractions next with our local experts. Anne-Marie joins us to talk to local experts about some of the top attractions in the city.
The Ulster Museum is Northern Ireland's largest museum, showcasing impressive collections of art and history and natural sciences, including treasures from the Spanish Armada and dinosaur fossils. Who better to tell us all about it than one of the guides from the museum?
I'm John Scoville. I'm a visitor guide in the Ulster Museum in Belfast. Well, the Ulster Museum is the most fantastic museum. It's probably the biggest in Northern Ireland. In fact, it is the biggest in Northern Ireland. The building itself is nationally important, internationally important. A brutalist building, classical lines at the side on the original. It's chock-a-block full of the most fabulous world-class exhibits from art, nature and history.
So the Ulster Museum is a really big place. It spans approximately 8,000 square metres. So there's lots to see. And I asked John where to start and what to expect from a visit.
So if you were coming into the museum, you'd arrive in an atrium. And from that, you can see 5 floors. And the best way to see the museum would be to come down the museum from the top to the bottom, travel down through art, nature, and history. So within art, with 500 years of fascinating paintings and drawings, from quiet Renaissance masterpieces, colourful Irish impressionists, vivid abstracts, and provocative messages by contemporary artists. So we've also got historical and modern ceramics and glass, fashion and metalwork. Then we go down into nature and you can see everything from giant crabs to dinosaurs to massive crystals to meteorites. You can see how life developed through over 4 billion years of geological history. But what's unique is our Elements exhibition. It builds from the smallest atomic particles to vast galaxies. So everything that you'll ever encounter is made up of elements and their properties, even ourselves. That blends into history and shows man's 8,000-year eventful journey from arriving in Ireland to the present day. So that's Vikings, Normans, plantations, Armada, industry and revolution. You can, of course, take a sidestep into our renowned Egyptian gallery, or you could take a world view of our collections through our inclusive Global Histories project.
Now, the museum really is a fantastic destination for all of the family, and there's lots of interactive elements that you can really get hands-on with.
What's unique to the Ulster Museum is our discovery centres. These are rooms for art, nature and history where you can get hands-on with objects. You can talk to the staff. They will explain things in more detail. You can touch a dinosaur egg. You can create your own art. You can dress up and explore Victorian toys. This is a really strong point of our museum.
One of the many things to love about the Ulster Museum is the fact that there is no entry charge and the guides, like John, are there to help.
We're free. We're a free museum. And the visitor guides are dispersed around the building and the galleries. We add extra value to the exhibitions and that we can take the visitor, the family, to the next stage. We can answer their questions on the objects. We can take them to other objects. And we are the people that connect from one parts of the museum to the other to make their journey and their experience much more interesting.
The Ulster Museum is nicely situated within Belfast and within easy access to public transport. And John here has some really good tips if you're travelling by car.
Well, it's very easy to get to. We're only just over a mile away from the city centre. It's a nice walk of about half an hour. You would come up past the university and through Botanic Gardens. But if you prefer, you can get a number 8 bus from the city centre and stops just outside the door. There's a Botanic rail station very close by. If you're travelling by car, there's no dedicated car park. So expect a little bit of a walk otherwise, because this is a very busy area. Whether you're an expert who wants to just research something, or you're a visitor or a family that want to explore, just be amazed. There's something for everybody.
So, moving on from one of Belfast's top attractions to another, there's actually a connection between Ulster Museum and Game of Thrones. The museum houses the Game of Thrones tapestry. It's a massive 87-metre long hand-woven tapestry that tells the entire story of the series from season 1 to 8. Another top destination to visit is the Game of Thrones studio tour. So I wanted to know if only a true fan of the show might enjoy a visit to the Game of Thrones studio tour, or is it for everyone?
So my name is Joseph Waters, and I'm one of the duty managers here at the Game of Thrones studio tour located in Banbridge, Northern Ireland, where fans or not fans of the show can come and actually experience a one-of-a-kind tour where you get to see some of the real sets that the crew would have filmed on, and all the real authentic costumes, props, weapons, jewellery. They've all been stored here. So this is, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, it's definitely a place, a must, I would say, on your list. If you're not, by the time you finish the tour, you definitely will be going home to watch it.
So Joseph gives us an overview of what to expect on the Game of Thrones studio tour. And first of all, a little bit about the beautiful building that it's located in.
The building itself actually is quite interesting. It was actually an old linen mill factory back in the 1900s. And then in about 2011, whenever it moved, the linen factory moved kind of offshore. It became the home of Game of Thrones. So that's what you're stepping into, essentially. Everything that is Game of Thrones, it's the epicenter of it. It's, you know, a place where you step out, you'll see the size of the building as well. It is quite breathtaking. And you'll walk straight in through the front doors, be greeted by our lovely staff, and then you will get to embark on a fun journey through Westeros, through real sets, where cast and crew would have filmed as well.
Game of Thrones, of course, is an iconic show with legions of fans, and I asked Joseph for some tour highlights and things to watch out for, including the Hall of Faces and the Iron Throne.
You start off, you'll step into our theatre room, which is essentially just a short show and kind of gets the customers excited for what they're about to embark on. Step into Beyond. That's kind of like the first area that you get into on the tour, and that's where you'll see White Walkers, giants. We actually have a life-size giant on the tour called 1-1. He's pretty impressive. So if you ever wondered how big a giant actually is in real life, it's an opportunity to get down to the tour and stand beside one and find out for yourself. Then you move on to our other rooms. So we have set production and construction area for people who are maybe studying university. Some people came and really loved it, who are into set building and making sets. So we have areas there for people who are more interested in that side of things. We have sets from Castle Black. We have the mess hall, where a lot of the scenes would have happened in the show, where the commander of the Night's Watch is kind of decided. So that's a big set that we have. We also have Bran's chamber from season 1 whenever he was younger. Moving on through the tour, we have the crypts of Winterfell that showcase some of the statues that protect the dead. We also then have Winterfell itself. So Winterfell Great Hall, it is actually untouched and unmoved since the show stopped filming, because the floor is made of flagstone. We weren't able to move. The tour was actually kind of built around it. So I'd say that's kind of our prize room that everybody loves here at the tour itself. And anyone who comes, you step right into the set. Some of our sets that you can get right up close and personal with to look at, but this one in particular, you get to stand in the middle of. So it's a really, really good chance to get your photos if you ever wanted to be a Stark of Winterfell. We also have from Dragonstone throughout the tour as well. We have the map room whenever Daenerys kind of moves over to Westeros there as well. Moving on, one of our big sets then we have is the Hall of Faces. So you can take your face and take a picture and add it to the wall of the faceless god, so that you get to pretend like you're one of them. And then two of our final sets are King's Landing and the Throne Room as well. Obviously, we have the Iron Throne, which is the original Iron Throne. So if you want to see the real Iron Throne, you should definitely come to the tour and check it out.
So Fionn, staying with West Belfast and the Ulster Museum, you have your own take on West Belfast.
Yeah, and can I say, I think the Crumlin Road Jail is one of the best tour experiences that you can have. I don't mean in Ireland, anywhere at all. It's really kind of, you get very, very close to the history of the place. Also, there's a little, I love these little factoids. You know, there's that expression in English when a judge has sentenced someone, they say, send him down.
Oh, yeah.
So that comes from the Crumlin Road Jail. There's an underground tunnel that leads to the courthouse. on the other side of the street, so that prisoners would be sentenced in the courthouse and then they would be sent down into the tunnels and then up into the Crumlin Road Jail. But West Belfast, despite bearing very much the scars of 30 plus years of conflict, is a fascinating place to visit. It's where you see the divisions of Belfast are best exemplified, the two parallel roads, the Falls, which is largely nationalist and Catholic, and the Shankill, which is largely loyalist and Protestant. You can walk up it. It's entirely safe. The Falls Road is probably more developed from a tourist perspective. You see the murals down towards the Divis Road end. And these are like constantly changing, very colourful murals that have become very, very famous now. But a really interesting and fun way to do it is on a black taxi tour. And for those of you who might know, black taxis are the classic way of getting around the city during the Troubles, is that people use them as a bus service. So you hailed a full black taxi, and if there was a seat, you just paid whatever it is, like your few pence, and you went up the road. Nowadays, a lot of those drivers have converted to becoming official and unofficial tour guides. So you pick, and they'll take you up the Falls or up the Shankill and down the other one. And then they'll take you to the Peace Line, the Peace Wall. And just to give you a sense, yes, it's very easy to visit. Yes, it's absolutely touristy now. But at night time, it's not the best place to be hanging around. These are still working class areas. So a certain amount of caution certainly should be exercised after dark. But during the day, absolutely safe to visit. The black taxi tours that I like are always the ones they'll tell you their own version of the history of the Troubles, and then at the end they'll have you guess whether the driver's Protestant or Catholic. And it's always very funny because I've been on a bunch of them and I've never guessed it right, ever. And that's very much part of the experience. But it's a great way of exploring living history, is just that tour. And also take your time, get out, walk along the streets and just have a look at streets that 30 years ago were coming out of 3 decades of genuine violence, and to see what they're like today, flourishing and dynamic and, full of life.
So we have that history, that bubble of history, where there's a big mirror difference between 30 years and 30 years prior to that. But you're also a fan of a period of history slightly further back than that, the Victorian era of Belfast.
I mean, it's worth pointing out that Belfast is a city, but only a city since 1888, when Queen Victoria gave it its official charter. At the heart of the city centre is the big city hall, which is really, really beautiful and free to visit. You just go in, you see assembly men and women going about their business, but it's easily visited. You can visit more or less all of the building, but I certainly don't miss the themed stained glass windows on the ground floor. This is along the northeast corridor. And then you have like the Spanish Civil War window, for instance, which, talks about the people of Belfast who fought with the International Brigade against Franco. Then you have another one commemorating the Docker Strike Centenary window, this is when Catholic and Protestant workers linked arm in arm during the strike of 1907. So a little piece of history that perhaps a lot of people don't realise. The most moving of them all is the famine window, which remembers the suffering of Belfast citizen on both sides during the famine of the 1840s. Another Victorian classic in the middle of the city is the Grand Opera House, which is really, really beautiful and can be seen on a guided tour, the interior. It predates the Victorian era, but the Linen Hall Library, which is close enough to the City Hall, it's across the street. This was established in 1788 by the members of the United Irishmen and moved to its current location in a former linen warehouse about 1798. And it has this really important collection of Irish local studies. It's got politics, really interesting museum. So if you want a deeper dive into the history of Belfast and Northern Ireland generally, the Linen Hall Library is absolutely terrific. I'm going to give you a little top tip for the best views of the city.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the Victoria Square shopping mall, because that centre of town is very popular as a shopping destination, as indeed most cities are these days. So there's a free viewing platform in the dome of the shopping mall, okay? And so you can see the glazed dome and you see the entirety of the Belfast skyline. So you see all of the city. And perhaps most surprisingly is how close West and North Belfast are to the Belfast Hills. You can walk up north of Andersonstown in West Belfast, and before you know it, you're in the middle of the open countryside. You're hiking in the hills above the city, and you can see those views from the top of this dome.
City that has history, modernity, wilderness on its doorstep. It sounds like it has everything.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, Fionn, We almost forgot to mention when we're here and we're visiting the Titanic Quarter and the Ulster Museum and the Crumlin Road Jail and the entries and Victorian Belfast, where do we put our head down?
Well, you've done your 10,000 steps and plus, so you're going to need to sleep somewhere. Good thing is that the accommodation scene has really flourished over the last 20 years in Belfast. I'm going to name 3 places. One, the Bullet Hotel, which is kind of slightly, not quite modular rooms, but relatively small, functional, really beautiful rooms. And it's designed with modern convenience, really. Fast Wi-Fi, comfy beds, what more do you want? You're not going to spend a huge amount of time in the room, but you're right in the middle of the city. 10 Square is the first kind of fancy boutique hotel to open up post 1998. But the service remains first rate. The rooms are really, really well decorated in contemporary art. And they're on Donegal, 10 Square's on Donegal Square. So again, right in the heart of town. But if I really wanted a luxurious stay, I mentioned it earlier, is the Merchant Hotel. It's got a great cocktail bar. But the rooms here in the former headquarters of the Ulster Bank are world class. Absolutely gorgeous hotel. I mean, you'll pay for it, but it's well worth every penny.
Coming up, Fionn Davenport will tell us the one thing he wouldn't miss about Belfast. But before we get there, we also asked our local experts for their own insider top tips on what to do if there was one thing not to miss and why.
One thing that I love to do in Belfast and when I have visitors over is go to St George's Market. It's a beautiful indoor covered Victorian market which really comes to life at the weekend with lots of food offerings and live music, and you get lots of little stalls that have local crafts, and it's a great place to explore, pick up a few gifts and taste some of the local produce.
Look, one of the first things you should do in Belfast is visit the City Hall. That's the massive white Portland stone building you will see right in the centre. It's accessible to the public. On the ground floor, there's 6 rooms all telling you the story of Belfast, once the industrial powerhouse of the world, with the largest shipbuilders, the largest rope works, and the major linen producer when it was known as Linonopolis. So the City Hall grounds, with its domes, its heritage, and fantastic selection of stained glass windows, is lovely. The grounds around the City Hall are well worth exploring. You've got a series of sculptures, including the Titanic Memorial, which is well worth seeing and contemplating. But you also have a lot of sculptures about the industrialists who established Belfast. And luckily, recently, we have 2 new sculptures of inspirational women in Belfast. One being Mary Ann McCracken, a suffragette and a real pioneer who looked after the poor people in Belfast who lived in awful working conditions. So visit the City Hall, and when you look across in the City Hall, you'll see the Visitor Centre. Visit Belfast.
So Fionn, we've heard from our local experts about the things that they wouldn't miss. What's your one thing not to miss?
Amid the bustle of the city centre, the narrow alleyways known as the entries, they're my favourite places to just walk around the city. Now, these were once the commercial and residential thoroughfares that connected Ann Street, Waring Street with High Street. So as part of the Belfast Entries project, a number of street artists were commissioned to design or to brighten up these alleyways with pieces that reflect the area's people, the culture, the history, etc. Pottinger's entry is the Morning Star, which has a great family-run pub. The Wine Cellar entry is White's Tavern. So go there and it's this little narrow alleyway that gets you to the pub. Joy's entry, which is named after Francis Joy, who founded the Belfast Newsletter in 1737. There's a statue of his grandson, Henry Joy McCracken, who was a United Irishman who was jailed in here in 1798. And then Crown entry is where the Society of United Irishmen was founded in 1791 by Wolfe Tone, who's an important figure in Irish history. And the street art there depicts a salmon, which is a reference to the River Farset. So these entries, these narrow alleyways lined with historic pubs and beautiful murals, I think that's the thing I wouldn't miss.
And to get a better picture of those, we're going to have photographs and images of those up on our notes. It's exploringireland.co. As ever, thank you so much for listening to Exploring Ireland. You can find out more and check out our show notes and links to everything you heard about today. It's all in the episode description, or you can go to exploringireland.co. Make sure to subscribe and follow us, because in future episodes we'll be showcasing the best attractions and destinations from all over Ireland, with the help, of course, of local experts. Helping us out in this episode and exploring Belfast, we had award-winning travel writer and broadcaster and Lonely Planet author Fionn Davenport, sharing his tips and knowledge, and our guides were Anne-Marie Walsh and Daragh O'Sullivan. I've been Dan McDermott. I hope you can join us again for another episode of Exploring Ireland. Until then, mind yourselves.